All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to open the Committee on Commerce here in beautiful room 100. Good morning. Just by way of executive session today, which we'll go into in a moment, if you're here for the excitement of House Bill 649, that excitement will take place next Tuesday. We have a couple of amendments to this that I think move us in a positive direction overall, but we need to sort of work through those two together and get it into a final form. We got one amendment last evening, so we need a little more time on that one. And I think that's all I really need to speak to at this point. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
All right, and we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, very good. I think all of you received the list of bills for execing today. And Aaron sent those out, and we're just going to run through that list in order until we run out of time or gas, whichever comes first. So House Bill 77 FN is the first one up. This prohibits storing certain information electronically, private information. And do we have a motion on this one?
I'm about to pass.
We have a motion about to pass. We have a second.
Second.
Second from, all right, motion by Senator Murphy, second by Senator McHugh. Any discussion on House Bill 77? And I'm looking to my right. Okay. There was one person in opposition, no one neutral, a number of folks in favor. All right, so we have a motion and a second about to pass. All in favor of the motion about to pass, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, I'll move consent. We have a second. All in favor of consent, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great. And is there someone who would love to take this out?
I'll do that.
Senator Murphy. Thank you. House Bill 81, consumption of beverages, liquor areas not approved for service by the Liquor Commission. I believe that refers to restrooms.
I move about to pass on HB 81.
We have a motion about to pass. Senator Fenton, seconded by Senator Murphy. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of the ought to pass motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll move consent.
Second.
And we have a second from Senator Murphy. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Senator Murphy, you want to take this one out?
I will if you like, sir.
Oh, to you. Okay, thank you. All right, next up, House Bill 225 FN. This is employment of military spouses in the event of involuntary deployment of a service member. I believe we have an amendment to this on the books, and yes, we do need to vote on the amendment. And, yes, Senator Fenton.
I'm okay with the amendment. Senator Murphy and I went through it together and understood it a little better, so I'm okay with the amendment and the outline bill.
Okay, and the amendment is 1573S. Further discussion? All right, so do we have any, you need an ought to pass motion?
I'm about to pass.
All right,
Okay.
and so we have a second, and then we have the amendment, right, which has been introduced. We can just vote on the amendment.
I'm about to pass on the amendment.
It's your amendment. I'll second. We have a second from Senator Reardon. Thank you, Aaron. All right, motion and a second on amendment 1573S. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and the bill itself, House Bill 225 FN, we have an ought to pass motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, do we have a motion for consent?
So moved.
Senator Ricciardi, seconded by Senator Fenton. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. 276. Yes, oh, somebody take this out. Who wants to take that out?
I can take it out.
All right, Senator Fenton, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Aaron. Keep me honest today. 276 FN, liquor license where beverages, wine, and liquor can be sold without food. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll move all to pass.
Okay, we have a motion of ought to pass on 276. Do we have a second? I will second.
And I speak to the
You
motion.
certainly may.
The liquor laws in this state, to be frank, are a joke. They are, I'm being very candid here, but they're ridiculous. We have this tradition in New Hampshire that we don't have bars. We have other things that can sell alcohol. So you can have 12 pool tables and get a license. You can have 2 tennis courts and get a license. You can have an alpine luge and get a license. You can have a dining car and get a license. You can have a golf course and get a license. You can have all these other things. And that's why the list of liquor licenses is 2 pages long. But you can't just sell alcohol. And when people want to find workarounds to avoid this requirement, it's not hard to do. There are places in this state that get by with literally a toaster oven. A few weeks ago, I was in Milford. There's a place there on the Oval doing a booming business. And it's literally a toaster oven and a menu with 6 things on it. And it's basically stuff you can get at Sam's Club, pretzel bites and such. And good for them. They're doing well. People like it. And, you know, I have 2 restaurants. Yes, those restaurants cost a lot of money to build. Yes, the kitchens are very expensive, but I'm not inclined to protect people from competition, even when it benefits myself to do so. I don't think that that's fair. It's an opt-in. Communities aren't obligated to take the licenses if they don't want to take the licenses. And I would welcome the chance to sort of end the charade that there is no bars in the state. Of course there are. And so that's why I'm moving all to pass.
I believe we have cigar bars, in fact,
do.
as well, with no food. Yeah, okay. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion of ought to pass. All right, all in favor of the ought to pass motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we have a motion for consent.
So moved.
Second.
Motion for consent and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, who would like to take this out?
If you would like me to, I will, but given my interest in the business, I would
I'll do
perhaps
it.
rather not do it.
I'll take it out.
Thank you.
Okay, 296, building permits along private roads. Senator Murphy, I think you have an amendment for this,
I do. I will move all to pass.
and I'll second that.
Dig out my amendments, Mr. Chairman.
And would you like to speak to your amendment?
I would. I do not have the amendment number.
Aaron, do you have the amendments?
Let me see, it should be here. I don't seem to have it in my binder. Okay. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. So what we'll do, Aaron, is jump over this one, and assuming we have an executive session after the hearings today, we'll cover it there. All right?
I'll make sure we have copies of the amendment.
Yeah, that'll give us a little time, probably 5 or 10 minutes after these, so we can get that taken care of. Okay. All right, let's then move on to 310. And it's a bill from Representative Ammon, Commission to study the creation of a regulatory framework for stable tokens, tokenized real-world assets, etc.
Move out to pass.
All right, we have a motion of ought to pass. Senator McGee,
Second.
second from Senator Murphy. Discussion. It is just a study commission.
Yeah.
All right. All in favor of the ought to pass motion on House Bill 310, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll move consent.
Second.
Second from Senator McGee. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and we will put it on consent. Senator McGee, you want to take this one out?
Sure.
Okay. House Bill 413, an act relative to subdivision regulations on the completion of improvements and the regulation of building permits. 413. Discussion on 413 or a motion?
Move all to pass.
We have an ought to pass. Do we have a second? I'll second. All right. 5-year exemption for subdivision plats to 7 years, increases the preliminary step from 2 to 3 years. No discussion? All right. It's an exciting bill then. All in favor of the ought to pass motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I'll move consent. Second. All in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Anyone want to take this out? Sure. Senator Reardon, it's yours. 505, freeze-dried foods produced in homestead food operations. I'll make a motion of ought to pass. Do we have a second? We have a second. Senator Murphy. Discussion. My view is anything that'll make it easier for small businesses to do business while keeping the public safe is fine. There was, one person in opposition. Department of Health and Human Services was neutral. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor of House Bill 505, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Move consent by Senator Reardon. I will second that. All in favor of consent, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and Aaron, I'll take this one. Should the need arise. 633. Oh, no. I skipped 577, didn't I? 577. All right. So this is the ADU bill that came to us, I believe, from Representative Alexander over in the House. Yes. Discussion on this one. Any motion?
I'll move on to pass.
We have a motion about to pass.
Second.
And we have a second. All right. And we have an amendment. Senator Fenton, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, I would. It's Amendment 1462.
Uh-huh.
Please let me know if you all have it.
I think we do.
Keene already does ADUs. I've heard a lot from the small towns around me that had opinions as well on this bill.
Mm-hmm.
And working with the Keene planner kind of on what they do, just to make this bill a little bit more palatable to those smaller towns. A couple things this does. Attached versus physically connected. The term physically connected is new, and the existing definition was already adopted as a compromise. Puts that back in. We're adding back in or by either conditional use permit pursuant to RSA 67421. This is language that's already existing in the law, which gets added back in.
Mm-hmm.
Adding back in with manufactured housing as defined in RSA 67431. Again, existing language already in the law. Changing if required by statute to if required by municipal ordinance. Currently, the final clause in 674 is if necessary, and this replaces it with if required by statute. The change I think would have created confusion with this bill. And then a couple other sections, we're adding in a municipality may require adequate parking. This is the same parking requirements for single-family dwellings, which will apply for ADUs. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't know why an ADU would get specific parking versus the house.
Yep.
And then we are also adding in a municipality may establish standards for attached dwelling units for the purpose of maintaining aesthetics. The existing section, sorry folks, I haven't had my coffee yet.
Rebel Stokes open.
Right. Municipalities often have aesthetic continuity standards for attached ADUs. So the ADUs look like part of the principal dwelling. I think that's important, especially for some of these neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna keep going.
Keep going.
Relative to detached accessory dwelling units is repealed. If the new law defines detached ADUs and establishes how they are regulated, there's no reason to have a separate statute for ADUs, for detached ADUs. And just move the effective date to give the municipality some time to implement this and make it feasible. And I think this is a pretty good compromise, keeps the bill essentially how it is, and makes it more palatable for the small towns to work with as well.
Okay, so you give them July 1st of 26. Discussion on the amendment.
I'd like to discuss the underlying bill when appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you. I have a question on the amendment. Roman numerals 7 and 8 on page 2. I'm just trying to sort through, a municipality can establish minimum and maximum sizes for an accessory dwelling unit, but nothing less than 750 square feet. But then the next, Roman numeral 8 says the total living space shall not exceed 950.
950, yeah.
Let me pull up my notes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I think that the senator from Keene is doing a great job representing his district, his constituents. I have to oppose the amendment for reasons that I gave to him in private.
Okay.
I just can't support it. And I don't think, I think a lot of the concerns about the bill are overblown. There are many towns that already allow detached ADUs, and they have so far, they're not put up routinely given the expense, and B, those communities haven't been overrun with ADUs. It isn't causing an increase in traffic. It isn't as if everyone is waking up tomorrow in duplex communities filled with renters. So I think a lot of the concerns are really overblown about it. Bedford has, and I lived in Bedford for years, Bedford has many ADUs, and they're quiet, unobtrusive neighbors, they're used for in-laws and elderly parents, and I think that's a great use. So I encourage the committee to pass the bill as it is.
Okay, thank you for those comments.
So to answer, Senator Murphy, I appreciate that. You and I work very well behind the scenes, which most folks don't see often. But to
we
answer Senator Reardon's question, may not be restricted to less than 750 square feet, but should not exceed 950 square feet. So in between there, we're talking about the minimum and maximum sizes.
Further discussion?
Happy compromise.
It may be.
I think with this amendment, Mr. Chair, nobody gets fully what they want,
Yeah,
but also everyone's getting something. And looking at the testimony, there was a lot in opposition, there was a lot in favor, and life is all about balance.
between this and 649, we can make a lot of people unhappy.
So we did
I mean, I'd rather make them happy. I'll tell you what, I want a little more time on this one. You and I really haven't talked about this amendment,
Yeah, we should chat.
and yeah, we should do. So Aaron, we're gonna push this back to next week as well. All right. That brings us to six, yes. Yeah, who made that motion?
I'll withdraw the motion.
And I trust he'll withdraw in a second. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. All right, 633. This was a bill that was turned into a study commission, I believe, by the House. And we do have a prime sponsor here, Representative Daniel. Do we have any motion on this one?
I'll move off to pass.
Okay, we have it on to pass. I will second. So, Representative, would you want to come forward? You comfortable with that? Representative Daniels? Are you comfortable coming forward to maybe talk about this briefly? Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for being here. Would you sort of introduce first yourself and then us to the original bill before it was amended by the House?
Okay, thank you. For the record, my name is Gary Daniels. I'm a representative from Hillsborough 43, representing the town of Milford and prime sponsor of House Bill 633. 633 intends, as originally presented, intends to create a definition for a housing investment trust. That's all it does. And as I explained in previous testimony, by having that language in, I have no objection to a study committee, but it would also be very helpful to be able to put that definition in so that we can continue working on this initiative, which is a multi-year initiative. So by not having that definition, it would kind of put the brakes on some things.
All right, Thank you. Are there any questions for the representative? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So, I mean, effectively, we have a couple choices here. One is to pass it as it is as a legislative study committee. The other would be to do that and also bring back sort of the original bill, which did create the Housing Investment Trust. So, I don't know, I'm interested in discussion on this one. Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm interested in doing exactly what you've just proposed, which is establishing the study commission, but allowing the interested parties that have put a lot of work into it at the request of both the executive branch and public and private partners. They're ready, willing, and able. So let's not tie their hands. Let them get started, recognizing especially that it will take some time. And we could easily address any issues that come up in the next legislative session, which is just right around the corner. So let's start the clock now and get them working and incorporate both the study commission and the language as introduced by the other body. So what I'm suggesting is a committee amendment that incorporates the original language of House Bill 633 as introduced, and we pass that.
Mr.
language.
Chairman,
Yes, of course.
I'm against the original language
Mhm.
for the fact that the bill we heard was on a study committee
Yes, it was.
and not the underlying bill.
Mhm.
So if that's the intent of some of the members, I think we should hold this bill so we can study the underlying bill a little longer.
Okay. Other thoughts? Senator McHugh?
I think we had a lot of discussion on the purpose and the impetus behind the original bill. It was heard in the House Judiciary Committee, and there was, and the original bill was very, very simple. It's in our packets. It simply added a new definition to the trust chapter. There's a good deal of expertise on this committee and on that committee. On that, I think it was pretty closely examined. I think we all recognize that there are several vehicles out there to accomplish this. This has bipartisan sponsorship, and anything that we can do to affect options to address the housing dynamic and ways for people to acquire homes or participate in equity accumulation is a good thing, and there's no reason to delay that. So those are my thoughts. It's a fairly simple bill as introduced, and it definitely warrants study as well. So we can come together on that.
One more follow.
Yes, of course.
I appreciate the senator's comments. Just looking through even the hearing report, Representative Alexander said there was confusion on the bill and they didn't fully understand it, and that's why it was turned into a study committee. And if they heard the full original intent of the bill and had confusion and decided to turn it into a study committee, I think it would be smart of us just to take a little more time with the bill if we intend to amend it to the original language.
I'm not opposed to that.
I would agree.
Senator McHugh?
So interestingly enough, I think you're correct. The committee that heard it in the other body, the Judiciary Committee, which is obviously neither the Housing Committee, of which Representative Alexander chairs, nor the Commerce Committee, which created much of the trust language when my colleague the senator from Concord and I served on it. Neither of those committees heard it, but the prime sponsor of the bill, Representative Alexander, chairs the Housing Committee. Should we amend this, I'm fairly confident that this bill would go back to the House Housing Committee for examination and concurrence.
Right.
And I'm highly confident that we would get that agreement from that body. That's just looking into my crystal ball.
Yes, Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm opposed to the amendment and the underlying bill. I see great work done by the private sector in New Hampshire right now, creating community loan funds and encouraging home ownership, not a bureaucracy that will
Right.
own housing. There will be some equity built up for a prospective owner who may never become an owner. And certainly they're not getting the value of all of the equity because there's something that has to pay for the bureaucracy. that's created by this. I didn't hear from New Hampshire Housing Finance. I didn't hear from anybody else coming in that said they agreed to be partnerships from this. It says it will be a charitable organization. That's not our call. That's the IRS's call, whether this is a charitable organization. And I think this is an interesting thought, a housing trust,
Yeah.
but there are much better avenues for people to actually achieve home ownership, act like a home owner, and get all of the equity of what they're paying into that.
All right, thank you for those comments, Senator. We don't have a motion on this, do we, Aaron? We do. So what I'd like to do is wait a week on this, and Aaron, let's do a committee amendment to restore that language from before, put it in my name. We'll do an amendment to restore that language, and then we'll spend some time on this one next week if the two senators would kindly withdraw their motions.
Withdrawn.
Okay. All right. Sound good? All right. So do your homework. We're doing this next Tuesday, come hell or high water. Or we might have both, the way things are looking. All right, 6:39. I'm going to suggest that we hold that until the end today after our hearings, and we'll pick that up with a couple of others. Could I get a motion to come out of executive session, please? All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're out of executive session. We'll be in recess for 3 minutes.
I talked to you.
Okay,
I think it's here.
what's that? Mhm. Yeah, I know them.
Mark eyes. I cannot, I have to take this off consent. I don't know if we can
You
do
can do
it
that.
today or if it passed, if I have to just take it off consent.
Just ask Sharon to pull it off consent. Yep, yes. Yeah, I think it's supposed to. Hopefully we'll be able to stay on time today. You didn't show up. To some extent.
I screwed up. My phone is blowing up. Tom Boucher and all these people, I have to take that bill off consent. My constituents are pissed off.
Which bill?
276.
Okay,
It's not about what I think, it's about what they think. I represent them. Like, I didn't,
remember the words of Edmund Burke.
Did I say that out loud? I know you are. All right, I'm going to bring Commerce out of recess and re-welcome everyone. And we have House Bill 280 coming up with Representative Ammon or someone to present the bill. Good morning.
Good morning, Senators. For the record, I am Representative Greg Hill.
Yep.
I am standing in for the prime sponsor, who is Representative Turcott, and I believe about 30,000 feet above the South Pacific at the moment. But not tuning in, probably.
I had the wrong bill open, Representative. Sorry about that.
It is 280, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
So I'm good?
You're great.
Okay.
It's me that has the problem today. Okay. All right. I'm sorry.
Never a good thing to point the senator made a mistake, but. I am here to introduce a fairly simple bill, and as the chair of legislative administration on the House side, it's always a good thing to reduce the size of our RSAs as far as I'm concerned. Like to get rid of committees and commissions and verbiage. This bill removes 430 words from existing RSA 275:43. After passage, the law would simply provide that the manner in which payment is made for work performed shall be determined by the employer and employee by mutual agreement. That's the primary goal. One is to obviously reduce regulatory burdens on our New Hampshire businesses. But the second is to allow employees who can negotiate mutual agreements for how they are paid, not based on government do's or don'ts. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. I am not the prime sponsor. I am a co-sponsor, however. But any questions that you have that I'm unable to answer, I'm certain that the prime sponsor will get back in touch with any of the senators with those questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Tricia.
Must have been good.
Senator Ricciardi.
Oh,
Thank you. I have my notes here. So thank you for taking my question. In this bill, there's no direct mention of payroll debit cards or testimony from the representative on MasterCard or ADP or any hidden fees. I just want to get clarification on that. In other words, there's no requirement that the payment be in a form that is readily convertible to U.S. currency. I'm reading my notes, so excuse me. And that an employee can use it. I just want to get clarification on exactly what that means. I mean, it might be gold, silver, crypto. We need to know exactly what the payment is.
thank you for your question. I too asked that question of the prime sponsor, and his response was that if you look at it from the other point of view, it's much more difficult when the agreement of the employee and the employer to payment in a certain fashion, and then they have to go back and look at the list of do's and don'ts that are available by the government. The last time that we had a problem here was when direct deposits started becoming fashionable, and we had to go pass a law to allow direct deposit where employees and employers were willing to do this. I think the point that, and I will certainly pass on your question to the prime sponsor, but I think the point is we believe that employees and employers would be able to work out in a mutual fashion how they should be paid and agree to it. It's only in my estimation, my question when I was looking at some of the prior testimony was from some of the union representatives that were questioning this. And I was told by the prime sponsor that that's somewhat of a red herring. So that may be an area that you want to review.
Yes, and follow up.
Yep.
I do appreciate that it's not, you're here representing it for speaking on behalf of someone else, but I do have to bring up concerns that were brought to me. And one of them is from a constituent, and she has 2 companies and she employs 130 people. And they do give the option of direct deposit and a check. But they had 2 individuals who had requested a green dot type of card. And she had told them, you know, we don't issue that. So in further concerns that she stated, her experience with the Green Dot prepaid card is that her son, who happens to work at the company, the payroll department got an email supposedly from him asking that his direct deposit be removed by the Green Dot. The long end of the story is they had to work very closely with their bank, and the money could not be recovered. And it's been deemed by the bank that they work with that they were told that this type of scam is generally from overseas, and the money goes out of the country and is not recoverable. So they refuse to use prepaid debit card for payroll. I just want to make sure, the question is that these questions get answered. This is making me nervous for people getting their paycheck and not really getting their funds.
I understand your
Okay.
question, and I will certainly pass on, and I will certainly have the prime sponsor get in touch with you.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. You referred a couple of times in your testimony that an employer and an employee ought to be able to agree on what the kind of payment is. But I'm looking on page 2 on line 21, and it says, the manner in which the payment is made shall be determined by the employer. And in both the intro on page 1 at line 3, every employer shall pay wages due to employees. It doesn't look to me like the employee has any discretion in here at all.
So thank you for your question, Senator. As I read line 20 of the bill as amended, it says the manner in which payment is made shall be determined by the employer and employee.
Page 2, starts on line 20.
Thank you, wrong version.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Any further
Thank you.
questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Representative Dan Leclerc. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Good morning, committee. Dan Leclerc, representing Amherst, but I'm also on the Labor Committee. This bill, I'm here in opposition to this bill for multiple reasons. First of all, it scares the hell out of me that all this stuff is being crossed out of the bill. Any lawful money in the United States. That's a lot. Electronic fund transfer, direct deposit, things like that. And what the senator brought up about being paid in debit cards and such has often been shot down in our committee because of the multiple reasons that you all talked about. And in the committee, we did have some testimony about this bill, and most of it was in opposition. I don't remember having many, if any, businesses come in and say, yes, we really want to do this. But also one of the things that scares me is the manner in which payment is made shall be determined by the employer and employee. Employer shall, on or before the first day of employment, inform the employee in writing the manner in which it shall be paid. And at any time an employer intends to change its method of payment, each employee shall be given written notice no less than 90 days prior to change. So that means if I'm hired on one day, we decide that I would like to do direct deposit. The day after I get hired, the employer can say, well, I'd like to change that, and I have 90 days to do so. It doesn't say that, I have to be working for you for a year, a day, a month, whatever, and all of a sudden they can change it. I personally would not want to be paid in Bitcoin, hunks of gold, cords of wood, or anything like that. So for all these reasons, committee, I'm against this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions for the representative? None, thank you.
All right, thanks
Appreciate your
again.
testimony. The Department of Labor, Danielle Albert, John Gary. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. My name is Danielle Albert. I'm Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Labor. I'm here today with John Garrigan, who is the department's general counsel. The department has reviewed the language of House Bill 280. We are neutral on the bill. sort of by way of our understanding of the proposed language, our understanding of the bill is that the bill is proposing to remove certain protections and requirements that relate to employers and how employers make payment of wages to employees, specifically that they pay in legal tender. The bill is then adding language that is requiring that the manner in which wages are paid to be determined between the employer and the employee. And as previous testimony had noted, the proposed language is further requiring the employer to give at least 90 days written notification if the employer intends to change the method of wage payment. And we would note that in reading that language, it is our understanding that that is not an agreement-based change, that if the employer makes the determination that the payment of wages is going to be altered, so long as that 90-day notification is provided, they've met the newly stated statutory requirements. So by way of context and to kind of give an overview of what to give an overview and an understanding of what the proposed language and practicality is going to do, it's specifically striking certain sections out of RSA 275-43 and removing specific requirements. Those requirements being that wages are paid in legal tender, either via cash, via direct deposit, check on a financial institution, or via pay card, but essentially in dollars. It's removing that requirement. It's also removing the requirement that checks, if wages are paid via check on a financial institution, that it be convenient to the place of employment with suitable arrangements made for cashing of the check for the full amount of the wages due. So that requirement would no longer be at issue. It's removing certain requirements around payment of wages via pay card. I believe, Senator Ricciardi, you had asked a little bit about the debit cards, those pay cards. If payment is made via pay card, there are a host of requirements already existing in statute specific to notification about fees that may be deducted by the card, by the employer or by the card issuer, third-party transaction fees and other things that tend to come up in relation to pay cards. Not issuing payment on cards that have expiration dates, things of that nature. And it's also removing a process whereby employers are required to make payment of wages in the form of health, welfare, or other pension fund contributions within 30 days of a demand for such payment. So those requirements would be struck. And replaced with a mechanism whereby the manner of payment can be determined between the employer and the employee. And that's a very broad requirement, as the department understands it. It doesn't have parameters around it. So payment could be agreed to in the form of gold, silver, trade, services, cryptocurrency, anything else that the employer and the employee come up with. The department would note we do have some concern in regulating such broad parameters. Currently, the statute as structured is setting a defined expectation that employers are paying in legal tender such that when disputes arise, the department is able to go in and resolve those disputes. Where it would be so broad and the department is somewhat uncertain if employees and employers are now agreeing to pay in trade or in types of services. I'm going to frame your building in exchange for services on my car or something of that nature, or cryptocurrency or gold or silver where the value is changing overnight. We're a little bit uncertain how we would be going in and making determinations in a reasonable manner to resolve those types of disputes. We also anticipate that there could be an increase in complaints, wage-based complaints to the department, as well as a potential increase in longer inspection periods and resolution periods. And in part, we do have concerns about enforcing any sort of determination that gets made that wages are due where the mechanism of payment is so broad. We would also note that employers would still need to be mindful of the federal requirements. The FSLA on the federal side sets certain requirements about how employers pay wages, that in essence that they are paid in cash or as an equivalent. So even if the state law were to change, the employers are still required to comply with federal law as it applies to them. And we would finally note that there could be some impact on the workers' compensation system in the sense that when an injured worker is going out of work, in order to calculate the amount of their indemnity benefits for time out of work, you're looking at wages. So if it becomes if there are broader ways in which wages can be paid such that it's difficult to quantify their value or their worth, insurance carriers may have difficulty in calculating out how much to pay injured workers and compensation rate when injuries do occur. So we do have some concern with our ability to regulate some of the proposed language that we thought was important to highlight, and we are happy to take any questions should there be any.
Are you aware of anyone paying their employees with Bitcoin?
I am not aware directly of anyone paying in Bitcoin, and under current structure of statute, that would not be a permissible form of payment.
And are you aware of any employers paying their employees with gold?
I am not.
Okay, thank you. Senator McHugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. I'm not that concerned that there will be a huge number of employers that want to pay in Bitcoin or precious metals. And if they do, I'm guessing those employees probably also want that or sought out those employers. My question, though, and where I would really like some input from the department, is on the timing aspect. The first question, and a follow-up or two, is how many employers or what percentage of employers have asked for the waiver to pay less frequently than biweekly, or say, for instance, twice a month, 24 times a year, so they avoid those 4 months out of the year where they have to pay 3 times a month? So like how often does that happen? Or if they want to pay monthly, they need the same waiver. What percentage of employers take advantage of that?
I don't have direct figures for you today. I'm happy to get them for you, and follow up to try to get a quantification of how often. I mean, the department does receive requests of that nature. There are parameters around that request. My recollection, and I'll look to Attorney Garrigan, is I don't think you can go in most circumstances longer than a month. But there are employers who do make those types of requests that are approved through the department. I can try to get you numbers of kind of how many are to quantify how much.
Follow up.
And then the follow-up is that would this, if we enacted this language, would it affect that? Would it make it more or less likely or easier for an employer to say, we're only going to pay you 24 times a year or 12 times a year, and cause a problem in those 4 months of the year for some people who plan accordingly?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I think it potentially could. And I think that comes back to the broad manner in which payment can be agreed to. I mean, certainly the other parameters or the other sections in the protective legislation section of statute at RSA 275 would still apply. The notification requirements, permission to pay less than or to pay more than weekly. If you're looking at something like trade or services, we're agreeing to pay, I'm going to perform X for you, and you're going to give me some kind of service or trade in return. I could see some complications in trying to give approvals on that, or in trying to determine whether or not it's actually been fully or accurately carried out, to even determine if the approval is given, have you actually paid in full? So it could add some potential dynamics or complications that don't currently exist.
Thank you.
All right. Any further questions?
Just
from the
one.
department, Senator Fenton.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. And I appreciate your neutral stance. But as the department, I would be terrified of this bill and the amount of litigation that you are going to see from wage claims. I could pay my employees in kittens if I decide to.
They don't have much value. I just got to point that out.
But also, and also let's say I have a trouble, an employee I don't like too much, and I want to get rid of them. And I say, hey, I'm going to change your how you're paid to kittens. Here's a 90-day notice. They don't want kittens.
But
So now, what recourse do they have to go after the business saying you've intentionally changed my payment method to get rid of me?
That's actually, I think, a very good question. As we understand the language as proposed, the employee and the employer do have to agree on whatever the manner of payment is. But if the employer determines that it's going to change, they do have to give that written notice. But we do not read that language to say that if that determination is made, that the employee must agree. So as far as recourse, if an employee were to contact the department were this language to pass, and it is they agree to be paid in cash, and then
kids.
or kids or toys or services or cryptocurrency or whatever it may be. They've agreed to that. That was the agreement. The employer then provides the written notification as required by the newly stated requirement. I'm going to be changing that to something else. We do not read recourse built into this new structure where the employee can say, I don't want to be paid that way. So if they were to bring that type of complaint to the department in regulating the new requirement would be looking at, was the requisite notification as required by statute given? If it was not, the recourse for the employer would really be assessment or warning followed by civil penalty if not corrected or if there was a repeat violation under RSA 273-11A.
Any further questions? Senator Shardy?
Thank you for being here and taking the question. Because the bill completely guts the requirement for payment in U.S. legal tender and also common secure practices such as direct deposit. So that means anything, like you could be paid in chickens, okay? And if you use a payment by a credit or a debit card, then there's going to be a fee issued. And wouldn't you find that a problem as wage theft?
It potentially could be. The language relative to making that the employer's got to make payment of wages at no cost to the employee, it still stays. Is that original language is still staying. If you look at 275-43-1, it's the last sentence before it goes through the language that's being struck out. As it relates to those pay cards, those debit card payments, there are a host of protections currently built into the statute if an employer elects to pay by that mechanism. All of that would be struck and would no longer be applicable. So the requirement to notify about deductions, to notify about any associated fees, all of those aspects would no longer be requirements that the employers would have to abide by.
Follow up.
Okay, so the part where they have to agree, but then there's 90 days notice. I mean, do you not see that as problematic to even your department? Because the person who may not agree may feel uncomfortable at their job or may have job insecurity and may have to look for a job, and therefore labor issues and lawsuits might ensue.
It's possible. I don't want to speak on behalf of employers or employees since we're the department, we're the regulator. What I'll emphasize is that as the regulator, really what we would be looking for were this language to pass would be whether or not the requirement that notification be given was made. How that impacts employees or how they feel about that, certainly that could be an outcome. I don't know that the department's the right entity to hypothesize or predict that. It could potentially lead to an increase in complaints or contact with the department where employees are unhappy that the modality or the method of payment has been changed. They don't agree with that change. But again, that recourse from the department's end in looking at regulating the newly stated requirement would be, was the requisite notification provided within the specified time frame, and then letting the employee know about, that's what the law requires. We would not have recourse built in to go through the stated language to go tell the employer that they would have to do anything differently.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Next up, we have Alan Raff from the AFL-CIO, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Senators. Thank you. My name is Alan Raff. I'm here representing the New Hampshire AFL-CIO, and I come before you today to oppose House Bill 280 relative to wage payments. This bill is a strange and unnecessary change to a statute that, if passed, will hinder the abilities of employees to feel secure in their employment, do their jobs, it will create uncertainty regarding compliance and enforcement of wage payments, and likely result in unintended consequences across the entire New Hampshire business
Sir, if I
community.
might, we have a copy of your testimony.
Yeah, I was going to say a bunch of stuff, but it's pretty much been covered. I will say, I think what's important to note here is that there's nothing that prohibits in law, legally speaking, an employer and employee right now agreeing to be compensated with something else. So we're making a law here to take a bunch of stuff out, but really you can already do this. So I think that's probably the best argument, aside from not wanting to get paid in animal pelts the day after you agreed to a contract that you would be paid in US dollars. But let's just say, looks like it's a bill in search of a solution that doesn't have an actual problem.
So presently, I could get paid in Bitcoin.
So you can have a separate agreement. I think it's called it would be called in kind, like you would be calling it a campaign situation, or it's like it's a different kind of compensation. But you can legally make that agreement. Freedom to contract. It's a thing that exists.
Just an editorial comment for kicks. The IRS would love trying to track all that down.
Yeah, right. I'm sure they would. All right. So thank you very much. Please.
Any questions for Mr. Raff? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 280? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 280. Thank you for all the input, and in a moment, we'll start House Bill 467. Okay, we're reopening the hearing on 280 because we have a number of additional speakers, so we'll go ahead with those, and we'll start with Mark McKenzie.
Mr. Chairman, I wait.
Okay, all right, Victoria. Mark does not want to speak, I don't believe. Claudia, I can't read your last name, Claudia. Estelle, good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, senators, for letting me speak. Is this on? There.
It is.
Thank you. I'm Claudia Estelle from Ackworth. I'm a member of the Economic Justice Ministry from the United Church of Christ in New Hampshire, and I'm speaking in opposition of the bill. I think that I emailed my testimony to you, and I think that Senator Riccardi read it because she made some of the points that I made. But I guess the thing I really want to emphasize is that there's inequity between employer and employee relationship. The employer has the power, the employee has to follow the rules. And so if you're hired, I guess I would say if I was hired and I was really looking forward to this job and I get to the job on the first day and all of a sudden I'm presented with a written paper saying that this is how I'm going to be paid, I'm not sure that I would have the gumption or even the freedom economically to make the choice to say, yes, I'll agree with whatever you're saying. I think that employees need to be protected, and I think that there's a lot of the issues that I had brought up were already brought up, but that's the one thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you for being here. Gail Kinney would like to speak as well. Good morning.
Good morning. So thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Gail Kinney. I'm a resident of Canaan. I am the pastor of the South Danbury Christian Church, which is also part of the United Church of Christ, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the state. And you've heard a lot already, I think, about this bill. So I won't go over what's already been said. But I just will say that my reaction and that of many, many people within the church and within the community when they looked at this bill was, what in the world were they thinking? And so just, I implore you that this is the kind of bill that that deserves and probably would get if it passed. Just the little snippet of a news slice in the national news, in the national media, just saying, look at the state of New Hampshire that has wiped off the books the notion that all employees in the state can be paid in any way whatsoever, and that it doesn't have to be legal U.S. currency. It's just simply, it's laughable if it hadn't already passed the House and is now before you. So I would just implore you to think about the insanity of this bill for the sake of every employee, young or old, in the state of New Hampshire, and do what needs to be done with this and give it a very, very quick and expedient to legislate, and then send it on to your colleagues in the legislature, and let's be done with this foolishness. So thank you so much.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Kathy Staub. Good morning, Representative.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for taking my testimony. My name is Kathy Staub, and I represent Hillsborough District 25, which is Ward 5 in Manchester. Ward 5 has a lot of people, many of my constituents, who are living paycheck to paycheck. They need every single nickel to pay for their rent, to buy food, to buy gas to put in their car so they can get to work, and to buy clothing for their children. Life is hard enough for them without introducing something like this. You know, if they weren't going to be paid in legal tender, they were going to be paid in kittens or whatever, you know, again, would they have the capacity to fight back? We have a very, you know, this isn't the Middle Ages. We have a very sophisticated economy. And I think that, you know, their ability to pay their rent helps landlords pay their mortgage. Their ability to buy food keeps the grocery stores for all of us. You know, the people that elected us rely on us to make sure that, you know, they're getting paid, that contributions are being made to their 401ks if they're lucky enough to have them, or their Social Security. And I think that we really need to think about them as we make legislation. And I hope you will consider this as you make your decision on this proposed bill. Thank you.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you,
Thank you.
Representative. Appreciate it very much. Anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 280? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing for a second time, and we'll pick up 467 in a minute. Okay, I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 467 and welcome Representative Boyd. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for having me today. Senator McHugh, Senator Murphy, Senator Ricciardi, and Senator Reardon, good to see you folks. For the record, my name is Bill Boyd. I represent Hillsborough District 12, the great town of Merrimack, and I'm here to introduce to you House Bill 467. It's a local option bill that defines social districts and allows municipalities to create said social districts. I've already emailed you over the weekend along with what I thought was a really good city guide that the city of Raleigh, North Carolina has done regarding their social district program. And so I will refer most of you to the comments that I gave in my email over the weekend, but I would like to amplify a couple of things, if I could, please.
Yes.
Specific definition for the folks in the audience and listening at home. Social districts are a public common area where alcoholic beverages are allowed to be carried and consumed in designated containers. The state of North Carolina, as I alluded to, created a wonderful piece of legislation from which the proposed bill before you has been modeled after the state of North Carolina. Came out of the Commerce Committee in the House by a vote of 16-2. It passed the House on a division vote 314-14. I've worked with Chief Mark Armaganian of the Liquor Enforcement Group. I've worked with New Hampshire Municipal Association Law Enforcement and Josiah Bartlett to coalesce and build some consensus around the bill. As I said, it's a local option bill. If communities want the bill, should this be enacted, if communities want to have a social district, they can do so, and they can work with liquor enforcement and their local law enforcement to create a plan that makes the best sense for that community. In looking at communities like Raleigh and Savannah, they've had tremendous success, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the city of Detroit, which emerged from bankruptcy. And in a pre-pandemic world, they had people going up to bars saying, "Are you open?" They're like, "No, we're not open, but we can give you a drink to go," and they would put it into a to-go container. And that's how, this is how it all kind of metamorphosized into tremendous success in the city of Detroit, which has flourished economically because of their ability to create a sip and stroll program that not allows people to congregate and recreate in a particular area, but also promote economic development in that particular neighborhood. They might do some window shopping and look at a retail store. They might walk into the local cigar bar and, have a cigar while they're drinking their beverage. There's so many different types of social districts that exist now today in Georgia and North Carolina and Michigan that, the creativity as to what can be happen as a result of this particular concept can only just benefit the economic development of a particular community that seeks to create it. So in conclusion, I would refer you folks to take a look at Tuscan Village. They have their own social district, and mind you, it's on private property, but they worked closely with Chief Armaganian and his team to come up with the social district that makes sense for what's going on in Tuscan Village. So in conclusion, I urge favorable passage of 467, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none.
Thank you.
Appreciate your testimony. Brody DeShay. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the Senate Commerce Committee for letting me testify this morning. My name is Brody DeShays. I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. I promised the Prime Speaker that we'd come and speak in support of this enabling legislation to allow municipalities to establish social districts. How the process would work is the legislative body, the voters, would pass a warrant article permitting their governing body to create a social district. The governing body would determine what the boundaries are of that social district. And then, they would work with the Liquor Commission and the state to be able to determine all, making sure that all these other requirements that are required in state law would be abided by. And they'd have a working plan with the state to, ensure safety in these social districts. So we're supportive. We've had members kind of, reach out in the past and contact us about how they could set up a process like this. Being in a Dillon rural state, there was nothing that currently permitted towns to adopt these types of districts or to allow people to carry open containers between businesses that are all in close vicinity of each other. And, we know that even specifically the city of Concord has floated such an idea with a few different commercial areas. And so, we're hopeful that the legislature will pass this and that our municipalities across the state will be able to work with the Liquor Commission to ensure that there is safe implementation of this, and ultimately it'll be the voters who determine whether or not a municipality can embark on this endeavor. So we view this as a great private-public partnership, and the state, helping fulfill its role to help create guidelines or guardrails along that process. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, appreciate your testimony. Anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 467? Yes, Mr. Klein, come on up. And I would note that the commission signed in neutral. I assume you can handle the capacity. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have an article I'd like to just distribute.
Yes.
Drew Klein, president of the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy. This article you're getting is from Business North Carolina magazine, which details they did a statewide story on the social districts and how they're working in North Carolina and how they're reviving downtowns all across the state. And I can tell you, I'm a native of Hickory, North Carolina. And every year, a couple times a year, I fly back home and visit family. And for years, we go down, my tradition every time I visit is to go to my favorite barbecue joint, which is downtown. So a couple times a year, I hit this barbecue joint, and it's always the same thing. Looking around at the vacant storefronts. Downtown Hickory's done pretty well. The mall didn't kill it, surprisingly. But there's always been vacant storefronts, et cetera. So we'd walk around and wonder what's going to go in that shop. Is there going to be a clothing store coming back? That kind of thing. Last year, I went back, and I am not exaggerating. There is not a single vacant storefront in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, in the entire downtown. Hickory is a mill town. It was a hosiery and textile and furniture manufacturing town. It might sound familiar to a lot of people in New Hampshire. Not a single vacant storefront. Well, being a policy guy, I started to ask around. I also noticed there were people drinking with plastic cups downtown, which I'd never seen before. So I started to talk to some business owners, social district, called the city. What happened? Well, we did the social district. We used to try to bring people downtown with individual events like an Oktoberfest. And the problem was You can only drink in the boundaries of the Oktoberfest. So what would happen? People would come and drink inside the festival and then leave. With the social district, they take their drink, they hit some stores, they hit some shops. Not only is downtown thriving, it's expanding. On the outskirts of downtown, which are still often old mill buildings, multiple new restaurants, new bars, new storefronts. So it is really reviving an old downtown that is dear to my heart. And so when we looked into this and talking to Representative Boyd about it, we looked around at other states, other towns in North Carolina. I can tell you, if you go through that list of towns in that article, I know a lot of those towns, a lot of them were dying. And this ability to just have a social district where people can responsibly drink in a very regulated way has helped to revive these downtowns. It absolutely has made a difference. So being a policy guy, I also started to make phone calls and say, okay, what about the crime? What are the negatives? What are the downsides? Not a single employee of any town or city I talked to identified any increase in drunkenness, public drunkenness, crime, anything. Couldn't find it. None of the stories that we looked at identified anything. And one of the employees put it to me this way: the people who want to drink like you would stereotypically think of Mardi Gras in New Orleans are not the same crowd that are attracted to these social districts, which are highly regulated. It's illegal to come in and bring your own drink. You can only buy one. It has to be in a certain container. It's very limited. So it attracts a very different type of person. So it's not creating that kind of college party or Bourbon Street atmosphere. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. But one thing I would note in the bill, and just as something to look at for you guys, if I can, maybe I left my copy. Here we go. So one of the requirements for possession and consumption, on the back page, number 3, the licensee shall not allow a person to enter or re-enter its licensed premises with an alcoholic beverage not sold by the licensee. Totally understand where that comes from. My concern is those licensee definitions include caterers. So in a lot of other states, and this happens in North Carolina, businesses that aren't bars and restaurants will take advantage of the social district to do catering or to get a temporary license or to get a full license. And they may be a shop, not an actual bar, but they'll serve cocktails and that kind of thing to go and take advantage of it. You want people coming into your shop, not to your bar, with a drink that you carried from outside. So because this licensee definition covers hotels and caterers, that might present an issue for certain businesses that are there. Just wanted to flag that as a potential to look at. So otherwise, I think the bill's great.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 467? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 467 and move on to 342 in a moment. I'm sorry, where'd that?
The prime sponsor.
Oh, yeah, so the next one. Yep.
Yes, in 42.
Yep. Of course not. 8:13. Are we ready, Mr. Aaron? All right. We will open the hearing on House Bill 342, and I'll welcome the prime sponsor, Representative Long. Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Patrick N. Long, AKA the other Pat Long, in case anybody was expecting someone different. I represent Hillsborough 26, which is Manchester, Ward 7. So the purpose of this bill is to allow property owners to build on their property in conformity with the existing level of density in their neighborhood without having to seek a variance for minimum lot size or minimum lot coverage requirements. And the specific inspiration for this bill was I received similar complaints from several of my constituents during my campaign last year. So a lot of my ward is built, the housing stock is built on 50 by 100 foot lots. So that's 5,000 square feet for anybody that's bad at math. And several people have bought additional lots thinking that they could build another house on it, either as a home for their in-laws, a rental property, whatever. And it turns out they can't because over the 50 or 100 years since their house was built, the city has ratcheted up the minimum lot size requirements. And depending on how it's zoned, that requirement is now anywhere between 6,500 and 12,500 square feet. So they would actually, in order to build, have to build something that is pretty incongruous with the existing neighborhood, and are not permitted to build something that matches what's already there. So to solve this problem, I took an idea that was in the omnibus bill last year that was unsuccessful in that bill, and I tweaked it to address, I think, some of the objections that were brought up in that bill. So last year, the proposal was a statewide 10,000 square foot cap on what minimum lot sizes could be. And I recognize that that is perhaps not right in some communities that have a more rural character and want to be able to maintain that. So I think that setting the cap on minimum lot sizes based on what's in the existing neighborhood is a way to allow rural communities to maintain that character and to address concerns they might have about adding too much burden to their sewage and water systems. And also is a better solution to the problem that my constituents have complained about, because where the neighborhood is mostly 5,000 square foot lots and the city has set a 6,500 or a 7,500 square foot minimum lot size that prevents them from building, that previous proposal wouldn't even have solved their problem. So this is what I came up with to address that. And just to address a couple of questions I got at the House committee hearing, because I assume you may have similar questions. The 1,000-foot radius is somewhat arbitrary. I mean, there needs to be some definition of what the neighborhood is. I think since the House has already passed that, it makes sense to keep that. In the neighborhoods that inspired this, that would be the next 10 lots in any one direction, and in somewhere that's less dense, it would be correspondingly fewer houses. If anybody has any questions, I can try to answer them.
Any questions for the representative? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony. Nick Taylor. Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'll be brief since I know we're running a little bit behind. We're here in support. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to critique the timing so far. We are here in support of the bill. Obviously, I'm Nick Taylor, Director of Housing Action New Hampshire. We advocate for pro-housing policies. I also previously served on the zoning board in Manchester, and we would deal with quite a bit of what Representative Long was talking about, where there were communities that were built prior to zoning that are now out of compliance whenever they want to try and make any sort of change or do anything around any additions, any changes to their property. And so we think this is a really innovative idea to look at context-based density. You're figuring out what the neighborhood previously supported, what it looks like, and how it could grow. We also appreciate that this is not a mandate that a property owner would go in this direction. They could use it, or they could go seek a variance. It's up to them. We will send some things over to the housing subcommittee. We do think sort of the lot coverage piece would be a little bit more difficult to measure when you're getting down to the specifics of actually surveying properties in the surrounding area, but certainly lot size and unit density make a ton of sense here, and hope the committee looks favorably on the bill, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. No? All right. Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Brody DeShays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for taking my testimony this morning. For the record, Brody DeShays, I represent the New Hampshire Municipal Association. We are opposed to House Bill 342 as amended by the House. House Bill 342 would exempt property owners in certain circumstances and, quote, neighborhoods, end quote, from seeking a variance. A neighborhood would be defined as, quote, the properties within a 1,000-foot radius of the subject property's boundary lines, end quote. And we agree with the prime sponsor, it's pretty arbitrary. We're unsure what point on the quote property's boundary lines, end quote, would be used for determining which properties are a part of a neighborhood. Basic kind of math is lines have infinite points. So at what point along that line are we going to be choosing to be able to, build that radius? And to utilize and determine, what is within 1,000 feet. Additionally, does properties, quote, properties within 1,000-foot radius, end quote, mean the entire lot must be within the 1,000-foot radius, or just a part or section of that lot? The bill is very unclear regarding which properties are really in the neighborhood. The key section, though, is in Roman 2, notwithstanding any provisions of law to the contrary, property owners shall be allowed to build on their property without seeking a variance for a minimum lot size or percentage of lot coverage if the proposed building conforms to the density of the neighborhood. So, again, defined in the earlier sections, which shall be assessed based on the density of 51% of the properties within a 1,000-foot radius and built before the effective date. First, it doesn't really determine what exactly is the 51% of properties. Section 3 also requires a municipality's, quote, zoning administrator to make this determination. Zoning administrator is not a position or municipal officer defined anywhere in state law. Some municipalities have planners and others have development or planning administrators with, and they might have a contract planner that helps them in the planning board. However, there is no uniform term for municipal employees or administrators who work on land use matters on the local level. You can go look at, the different job postings that are out there, or, reach out to your local municipalities and learn that they have a lot of different terms for what they might call these people who clerk for their planning boards and their zoning boards and provide some administrative guidance, sometimes very limited with a contract planner who might work for multiple municipalities. House Bill 342 also places the onus on the town and requires the likely non-existent, quote, zoning administrator, end quote, to determine whether a property owner qualifies to be exempt from a variance under the Roman 2. So to make such a determination would probably require usage of ArcGIS software or similar software system, which most municipalities haven't purchased or don't utilize for planning and land use matters. These software systems are expensive and requires employees or consultants with proper training to actually read and interpret the data. And this is especially true when it comes to the lot coverage requirements or even specific acreage in these quote neighborhoods that might have been developed pre-zoning. House Bill 342 would increase costs on municipalities in their planning departments, and you'd be asking them under this, or a landowner would be asking them under this mandate to kind of do an impossible task. The bill also assumes that municipalities may have adopted zoning or changed their zoning or assumes that municipalities may have adopted zoning or changed their zoning ordinances. Let me restate this. The bill assumes that municipalities didn't have an interest in adopting zoning or changing their zoning ordinances due to overdevelopment to limit stress on local infrastructure or other negative impacts that may have been happening locally. They may have had more lax zoning in some of these denser districts and urban areas, and then they realize, oh, there's a lot of development happening in this zoning district. We need to kind of slow development and maybe encourage development in other areas of our city or town. So House Bill 342 is very administratively unworkable as it's currently written for the vast majority of municipalities because they aren't equipped to implement these determinations on behalf of a landowner. And even if the bill is cleaned up with definitions, it's just the fact that most municipalities won't have a software system or someone employed with them that can make these specific determinations on behalf of a landowner. And with that, I'll take any questions if the committee has any.
All right, questions for Mr. Deshay? Thank you. Appreciate it. The Realtors. Good morning, sir. Mr. Norwood.
Good morning, Senator Innes, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Chris Norwood. I am the Vice Chair of the 2025 Public Policy Committee for the New Hampshire Association of Realtors and our some 7,000 members, and I'm urging you to support House Bill 342. Again, in the interest of time, I'll just be very high level and brief. Variances are expensive for property owners to obtain, and they're very time consuming. And when there's a common sense alternative to seeking a variance, this is something that we support in the effort of supporting private property rights. We think the sponsor did a good job of taking an innovative concept from last year and adopting it specifically when you start talking about the defined neighborhood. And you can start to think it's common sense to say that these properties should already have attained a variance to get that similar density. For those of you not familiar, variances require proving 5 hardships. One of those hardships is that you shall not negatively impact the neighborhood in which you're seeking the variance. And I think, again, the sponsor did a good job of making sure that that hardship would be met. Otherwise, to say that the community that you're involved in within 1,000 feet of your property, if they all are similar lot sizes, therefore you should be granted that same ability to have that density for private property rights. So urge you to support the bill, and I'll happy to entertain any questions. Thank you.
All right, questions? Yes, Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. One of the communities I represent raised an issue, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. When we talk about building on that lot, we're talking about residential building. We're not talking about building anything you want. Is that your interpretation of this too? Where it says that the property owners shall be allowed to build on the property. We're talking about a housing unit. We're not talking about building a small convenience store or anything like that.
So it's a good question, Senator. Which line are you on?
I am on line 10.
10.
So it starts on 9, after the comma. Property owners shall be allowed to build on their property without seeking a variance. Are we making the assumption that that's a residential unit we're building?
So thank you, Senator, for taking the question for asking the question. I had interpreted this as residential until you brought this up, but I don't see a distinction here in the text.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Senator, do we need amendment for that?
We do need an amendment.
Would you do one?
Sure.
Okay, great. Anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 342? Come on forward, Mr. Klein. You gotta check that yes box.
I swear I signed up on all these.
You
So
signed
maybe
up, but you didn't mark yes to speak.
Oh,
So,
yeah. I'm still learning your mysterious ways in the Senate.
All right.
So the Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, Drew Klein, President. We really like this bill. So for about 300 years, if you started with Portsmouth, New Hampshire communities have grown organically until the early 20th century when zoning came up and government started to impose arbitrary lines to stop that organic growth and contain it and change it. This bill would go back and restore a measure of that organic growth, that ability to do infill, that ability to develop it consistent with the neighborhood, which I think is the most important part of this bill. It's a much better way of doing zoning than those arbitrary lines. And just to give you an idea, 1,000 feet is roughly from here to Waterworks Cafe. Like the Works Cafe, sorry. And I know that because I have an Apple phone and I just mapped it, so I didn't need GIS. Maybe that would be requirement for your town, but I don't think it's really that hard to figure it out. And to your question, Senator Reardon, as I read the bill, line 5 defines density as the number of dwelling units per acre. And then you go down to line 9. So I read the bill as purely applying to dwelling units. Just, you want to get a lawyer to look at it, but that's how I read it. Happy to take questions. Otherwise, good.
Are there any questions, Senator Richard?
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks for taking my question. Would this bill supersede a situation where, say the property has water on the property, a brook, and then there's a setback that the town has for building near that water? Would that still stay in place, or would this supersede that?
You might want to talk to someone more technical on this, but as I understand it, what it's changing is the density requirement. So that's what you're looking at, is the density in the zoning. I think the other measures would likely conform, or would still apply, as I understand it.
I just want to be clear.
Yeah, but you might double check with the sponsor on that, but that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Klein. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 342?
Address some of the questions.
Certainly, Representative, you may.
So this bill would only exempt anyone from the requirements regarding minimum lot size and minimum lot coverage. So any other requirement that's in place in the zoning code, whether it's not being able to build commercial, having a setback from water, that is not affected by this bill.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, thank you, Representative. Anyone else on 342? All right, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 342, open 457 in just a moment. Okay, before I open 457, House Bill 60 we will get to today, I believe, but I have every expectation it's going to carry over to next week. We have a large number of people signed up to speak on that one, a pretty fair number on this one. We'll do our best. We have a hard stop at noon, so just be aware of that. All right, I'm going to open House Bill 457 and invite our sponsor to come forward, Representative Pear. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce to you today House Bill 457. For the record, I am Representative Diane Power. I represent the towns of Brookline, Mason, and Greenville in Hillsborough County District 36, and I also serve as the chairman of the House Municipal and County Government Committee. So to begin, this bill is a refiling of 2024 House Bill 1281. And that bill, as well as this bill, has strong bipartisan support as for co-sponsors. After this bill 457 was introduced to the House Committee, the Housing Committee in the House, it was essentially repurposed by a committee amendment to change a completely different RSA, and that's RSA 354A:8, equal housing opportunity without discrimination, a civil right. And as a prime sponsor, I understand that once a bill is introduced to a committee, it belongs to the committee, but I would like to note for the record that I was not consulted about this amendment. So as a result, the bill, as amended by the full House, was, while well-intentioned, to me, as a prime sponsor, it no longer fully meets the intent of the bill as filed, which is to prohibit municipalities from enacting and enforcing zoning ordinances related to the occupancy of a dwelling unit that are based on familial or non-familial relationships or marital status among the occupants, or restricts the number of occupants of the unit to less than 2 per bedroom. This legislation is needed in our state, and I did some research, which I provided a handout, and the research was done in 2023. So when I did that research, I found that there are at least 8 municipalities in our state with zoning ordinances that unreasonably limit the number of unrelated people legally permitted to live together. I was not able to look up the zoning ordinances of all 234 municipalities in the state. It was pretty arduous for me to do the research that I did. In fact, zoning ordinances that arbitrarily limit the number of occupants of people who can live together to no more than 3 are commonly referred to as a 3 unrelated rule. This means that it would be illegal for 4 unrelated friends, coworkers, students, or even senior citizens to live together in a 4-bedroom dwelling unit, whereas a family of, say, 8 with 2 married adults and 6 children could legally live in the same 4-bedroom unit. To be clear, in the midst of a severe housing crisis in the Granite State, zoning ordinances like this are highly problematic for a number of reasons. First, overly restrictive zoning ordinances, they're a clear infringement by government on property rights of individuals to be able to use their property in a way that genuinely does not pose any health or safety concerns in compliance with laws. Second, overreaching zoning ordinances that go beyond the health and safety concerns. They artificially limit housing opportunities for people seeking housing. And they also negatively impact affordability and the supply of housing. Third, zoning ordinances like the 3 unrelated rule, to me, are essentially unfair practices that needlessly discriminate against unrelated people seeking housing. And these people, as I mentioned before, they can include working professionals, working our workforce of all ages who might want to share housing in order to reduce expenses, and also maybe to be able to pay off college loans or save for a down payment. They include people who are widowed, divorced, or retirees, individuals living on fixed or low incomes, even people that might be in between jobs or experiencing loss of employment. It also includes the elderly and disabled persons, maybe needing in-home care, single parents as well, and also students who may want to share housing in order to be able to afford the cost of room, board, and tuition. And I'd like to point out at this point that, interestingly, earlier this year, there's one town here in New Hampshire who actually changed its 3 unrelated rule zoning ordinance by defining a student rental which I quote as follows: student rental. A student rental is a residential dwelling composed of 1 or more dwelling units on a single parcel that includes 5 or more full-time undergraduate college students as defined by federal law. Couldn't really find that definition. The threshold of 5 applies to the total number in dwelling units on a parcel. For example, a 3-unit building with 2 full-time undergraduate college students in 1 unit and 4 in another would be classified as a student rental. And then this particular town went on to further restrict student rentals to commercial zones in town only. So I'd like to make a final point. The Fair Housing Act protects people from discrimination in housing, but it does not apply to students and unrelated persons because they're not protected classes. As a result, students and unrelated persons seeking housing in our state are being treated unjustly by municipalities by these overreaching zoning ordinances, and the property rights of landlords are being infringed upon by municipalities due to unreasonable occupancy limits, which fail to reasonably take into account the number of bedrooms in a housing unit. When this happens, it's incumbent upon our state legislature to intervene on behalf of its citizens and amend the zoning powers it has granted to municipalities. And I'd also like to quickly make a few more important points. In the House, when this bill was presented, there were people that provided testimony, and I'd just like to draw your attention to this if you hear this today. They said that this bill changes the use. It doesn't. We're still talking about residential rentals. We heard in the House that this bill somehow overrides and allows boarding houses. Again, it doesn't, because my understanding is that a boarding house, I have the definition somewhere here. Yeah, a lodging or rooming house is a building or portion thereof that does not qualify as a 1 or 2 family dwelling that provides sleeping accommodations for a total of 16 or fewer people on a transient or permanent basis without personal care services or without meals, but without separate cooking facilities for individual occupants. Again, in my estimation, this does not override boarding houses. Then another issue that was brought up is somehow the bill as filed, it violates the life codes. And when I did the research and was drafting language for House Bill 1281, I did have conversations with the New Hampshire State Fire Marshal and raised concerns that I was hearing. And he communicated to me that this life safety code that was being referenced, it's 24.1.1.2, he said that this does not apply to this situation. And I would also like to note the bill as filed in lines 10 through 11, I did specify that the enforcement of all building and state fire codes shall not be prohibited. So I would urge this committee to please consider what I've said here today, and to consider an appropriate committee amendment that achieves the full intent of the bill. And that would be two parts. It would be addressing the number as well as the status of people who are renting. And that concludes my bill introduction. I'm happy to take any questions.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Representative. The current language of House Bill 457, that exact language was passed by this committee and the Senate as part of Senate Bill 170. So it might be a bit redundant to pass the same language twice. Is your recommendation or your request to go back to your original language and have a belt and suspenders approach? Or, I mean, why pass the same thing twice?
Correct. So yes, it was my understanding that this language in the bill that passed the House is the exact carbon copy language of a Senate bill. So that was curious to me. And so, yes, to be clear, the bill that I filed, I would like to see language that more closely relates that, and that would be up to the committee, and I'd be open to collaborating with you if needed. And I also, I have some handouts. I don't know if they got passed around, but I did lay out the bill as filed, the House committee amendment, and then my proposed language. And then there's also there's also another version of a proposed Senate amendment that was given to me by constituents who, to me, are subject matter experts in this area because they happen to live in this particular town that went and is pivoting with regards to their zoning ordinances to prohibit students.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Representative Power.
Thank you.
Brody Deshay.
I have some written testimony I can hand to you guys after. So my name is Brody Deshays. For the record, I represent the Hampshire Municipal Association. We're opposed to House Bill 457 as currently written. Specifically, lines 7 and 8 of House Bill 457, the bill adds language attempting to prevent municipalities from adopting requirements in their zoning ordinances to limit the number of unrelated occupants in a residential dwelling unit. It's a very unconventional place to try to put a zoning mandate. Chapter RSA 354-A, New Hampshire's laws against discrimination, and placing this language in RSA 354-A:8 assumes that zoning ordinances that limit congregate or group living in zoning districts are discriminatory. These zoning ordinances treat all persons the same, no matter their race, age, class, creed, gender, sexual orientation, marital status, familial status, or any other state or federally recognized category. Permitting group living in some zoning districts and not others is strictly a land use issue and not discrimination. It treats everyone equally. Additionally, RSA 354-A:8 has to do with access to housing, so the ability to rent or buy a property, not locally adopted zoning ordinances or land use. And municipalities don't regulate whether or not someone can rent or buy a property. That's not a power the state has ever provided to municipalities. Many municipalities have ordinances to regulate any building or portion thereof that is utilized for congregate living. Under these zoning and planning ordinances, the municipality will often permit the usage of in some zoning districts and regulate the dwelling units that meet the definition of, we've seen the term, an example would be the city of Keene, quote, congregate living, end quote. Some examples of residential uses that may qualify under these zoning ordinances are group homes, fraternities and sororities, group resource centers, homeless shelters, lodging houses, residential care facilities, residential drug and alcohol treatment facilities, recovery homes, and other similar uses. While many of these buildings may look like a single-family, two-family, or multifamily dwelling, their use is much different in nature and the impact on the municipality and its residents. It's like the difference between your home or apartment and a boarding house or a private dormitory that rents per bedroom leases. There's a lot more people, a lot more cars. You need a larger parking lot. You need, have a proper traffic pattern. Typically, it's going to go through site plan review. And again, there's a change of use. So if all of a sudden you take a single family dwelling unit and you start using it for a group living, it needs to either possibly get a variance depending on the zoning district, and it'll need to go through that site plan review requirements as adopted by the local legislative body, the voters. These zoning ordinances aren't arbitrary either, but often line up with the fire code. For example, many are triggered at 4 unrelated people living together in a specific dwelling. I would also like to share the New Hampshire Municipal Associations. We've been quite opposed to some of the misleading comments and hypothetical situations regarding local zoning ordinances that regulate group or congregate living in some zoning districts. Some organizations have repeatedly stated that same-sex couples who adopt children would be prohibited from living in a regular dwelling unit in some municipalities' zoning districts due to zoning ordinances that regulate or prohibit group living. These statements are false. No municipality in New Hampshire has zoning ordinances that would discriminate against any federally or state-protected class of person. A same-sex couple, even if they aren't married, would be treated as one person or family in a municipality's zoning ordinances. The same-sex couple adopted children, those children would be part of the same-sex couple's family unit. That family unit would be treated as one person or family under the municipality's zoning ordinances regulating group living. So even though these individuals might not be related by blood, they are a family and treated as such in municipality zoning ordinances like yourselves and your families or myself and my family. So as we've repeatedly stated, same-sex couples and their family would be treated like any other couple or family. This is strictly an attempt by some of our municipalities, those that disproportionately have college students, college towns, where they want to prevent their housing stock from being bought up by landlords to do per bedroom leases. They want to keep some areas for the workforce and housing available for people who live there year round and keep the college town going, and then make sure that, yes, there is ample housing supply in zoning districts near some of these college, whether it's publicly owned dormitories or where the classes and they attend school. With that, I'll answer any questions, and thank you for taking my testimony.
Thank you. Senator Murphy.
Mr. DeShay, if you have a house in a college town that was going to hold 6 college students, and the town has an ordinance that says you can't have more than 3, where do the other 3 go?
Sorry, what was the end of your statement
When you
there?
have a house that has it's going to hold 6 college students, and the town has an ordinance that says you can't have more than 3, where do the other 3 go?
Well, obviously not that dwelling unit.
Maybe the one next door?
It would depend. I mean, I know some universities have requirements that you have to live on campus. An example is St. Anselm College. So they might be able to provide and have provided ample housing. There might be other rental units that are available in the area. So, it would depend. And again, you're also assuming maybe in their zoning ordinance, they do allow in the zone per bedroom leases. You could also apply for a variance if someone shows, hey, there's a shortage and there's clearly a public benefit to making sure these students have housing. They might go to the zoning board, apply for a variance and be granted one.
I'm filling the name, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make the point that I think sometimes these regulations backfire. In this case, the regulations might actually make the problem worse, if it is a problem to house people. Because what would have fit in 5 houses now takes 10, right? So you actually get more of a sort of spreading the butter effect. But I didn't mean to argue, and I apologize.
No, and I appreciate the comments, Senator, and I think also there's definitely a double-edged sword where if all of a sudden the housing stock is bought up for students who will be here temporarily and likely not stay in New Hampshire, then you've lost housing for people who will be long-term in the workforce in many of these municipalities. So in some ways, municipalities are just trying to protect existing housing stock to address the housing crisis. And this bill, I think, would actually have a negative impact in preventing more housing long-term for people in the workforce or people who want to live in the municipalities to be able to stay there. So it might become a bidding war where developers realize how much money can be made from these per-bedroom leases and in college towns, and profit incentive will then overrule the needs of the municipalities and the ability to build the workforce in that area.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Deshays.
Thank you.
Representative Wheeler. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Ennis, members and friends on the Senate Housing Committee, Senate Commerce Committee.
Similar.
Yes. My name is, for the record, Representative Jonah Orion Wheeler. I represent the towns of Peterborough and Sharon. I'm here today to testify in support of this legislation as a co-sponsor. I think that others will handle it well. I think it's been run through already in both testimony and support and opposition, but I think, as was stated by Senator Murphy, this regulation and regulations like these might make the problem worse in trying to solve the problem. And when you at a state level say to yourself, okay, we can make the economy such that you can't control an economy in a legislature, and it's not how it works. And this doesn't change lease agreements. You know, if a lease agreement is such that they don't want whatever they want in their bedrooms, that's still available to that landlord at that landlord's prerogative. But this means that a municipality can't come in and say, oh, you can't have X amount of people in your bedroom because you don't happen to be related by blood or marriage. There are plenty of situations where it's better for that individual who's renting the house to have somebody in there who's not related by blood or marriage. So with that, Chairman Ennis, thank you very much for your time, members of the committee, and I hope you'll pass this legislation.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions? All right, appreciate your testimony. Mr. Klein, would you like to speak? I indicated on my sheet that you do. So, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Drew Klein, President of the Josiah Ballard Center for Public Policy. I'll be really quick. Government has no business regulating the relationship status of who people freely choose to live with. I mean, you could say it as simple as that. But from a policy standpoint, so from a right standpoint, there are public interest law firms that are currently looking at relitigating these cases to the U.S. Supreme Court under First Amendment free association principles. So just New Hampshire does not want to be that test case. We have some towns in New Hampshire that this situation qualifies for, but you have some places where you have a 55 plus retirement community that the town allowed to be developed. And elsewhere in town, it's illegal for people 55 plus to rent a house together if there are more than three of them in the same town. Well, you're going to have to go pay $750,000 plus for your home in the 55 plus community. Why would the town make it illegal for 4 retirees to get a home together? It makes no sense. So from a rights standpoint, it's bad. From a public policy standpoint, these are terrible laws. So the bill would be a good addition to New Hampshire's laws.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, appreciate it. Let's see here. The Realtors, Mr. Norwood.
Good morning again, Mr. Ennis, Chairman Ennis, as well as members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Chris Norwood, representing the New Hampshire Association of Realtors, urging you to support this bill. While opponents may say that the current towns that are prohibiting 3 occupants or more is not a discriminatory act, certainly myself as a realtor, I would not want to be a leasing agent asking multiple parties if they were married or any other questions surrounding that. So I'm not quite sure how the town has the right to ask those questions where if I were to do so, I do believe I would be challenged in court. Also, I do believe that there are some misconceptions that this bill, if passed, would allow for other types of uses to infiltrate zones, such as rehabilitation centers and so forth, and those have a medical, position in my mind. So I do think that it is a different use case. It is not a residential dwelling situation. So with that, I think that this is a private property rights issues, and I think that some municipalities have gone too far, and this is a common sense way to stop that. So with that, I'd ask for your support and happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Mr. Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jeff Berlin, please, representing the small landlords. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Nice to meet you guys. 2 years ago, I sort of initiated this bill through Diane Power in the House with HB 1281. And the reason was because another friend of mine who owns property at the University of New Hampshire was the subject of massive abuse by the municipality to enforce such an issue as the unrelated laws. Diane did an excellent job explaining what the issue was. I don't want to go over everything that she said again. But one thing I will like to just highlight here is that I've heard people talking about how, we're trying to reserve housing or keep housing affordable for certain groups of people. At the heart of this issue is the removal of supply of rental units from specifically college towns with respect to this particular zoning. So when you remove supply from a market, you artificially increase the rate, not just for students, but for the workforce, for anyone who's looking to live in that community. And so, as Diane also mentioned, unfortunately, the architects of this zoning from 35, 40 years ago, in all of their savviness, have sort of capitulated because of the actions that we've taken at the state level. And they have since, just months ago, changed their zoning. Originally when we introduced this bill, we had a hard time explaining how the unrelated rule affected students. And these people actually took, they defined students the next year, and segregated them and discriminated against them specifically in residential zones that touch campus. So it's just egregious in my mind. And so the intent of this bill, I think, is the key. And I don't know if the bill as written actually solves the latest rendition that the architects have changed in the local zoning and specifically Durham. And so I would strongly suggest you guys adopt an amendment that would specifically tackle the issue related to students. I know the Senate bill that you guys had discussed, I believe Representative Joe Alexander had discussed with some of you guys about simply adding in students full-time, however you want to describe it in the law, specifically students as a protected class. And if you sort of just walk through the process of that, it would be like the same as like if you had a zoning amendment or a zoning regulation that said no more than 3 Black people were allowed to live in a dwelling unit, that wouldn't fly. So if you just add students to that, I think that should cover it. I do believe our intent of the original bill, though, because as we've seen, interpretation is a major issue, right? So the House municipal committee or whatever, they could interpret it completely different than somebody else. So using language specifically outlaw the discriminatory practice of limiting college students in certain homes, I think would be the best. So thank you. Any questions I can answer?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Seeing none, appreciate it very much. Nick Norman, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Nick Norman. I work with housing providers across the state. I didn't come here to speak on this bill, actually. I came here to speak on the next one, but since I was here, I thought I would just chime in. And as housing providers, we would be supportive of anything that would create more rental housing. With our housing shortage that we have in the state, anything that would create more supply would help to reduce demand and help to make the whole affordability issue ease. And in today's society, I can't see any reason that there shouldn't be regulations that say people that are unrelated can't rent in the same dwelling. It's just mind-boggling that people would even begin to think that. It's a very common practice, rule of thumb in the industry of renting apartments and fair housing. that you go with the idea of 2 people per bedroom. It's not a law, it's not written down, but that's the rule of thumb. And there's no reason that we could see why it should be more limited than that. If you limit it more than that, you're reducing supply. It worsens our problem with housing affordability. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thank you very much. Natch Grays, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nate Grays for the Business and Industry Association. We support this legislation. We believe that the amendment as introduced by Representative Power would be a stronger amendment in terms of increasing housing supply because, of course, what it would be doing is tackling existing units that are underutilized at the moment that would, enable us to fill those units to capacity, which would ease some demand issues that, as you know, from basic economics would ease the price pressures. And so we'd be hopeful that we'd see some relief in at least some markets in the state. The bill was introduced. We're also supportive of course, because there are always liability concerns when businesses have to ask occupants due to some government regulations about their relationships, while other governmental regulations at other levels would provide protections. And we certainly don't want business owners to be the ones to bear the costs of disputes between local governments and federal protections and state protections in both the federal and state constitutions. Happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Any questions? All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Grays. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on House Bill 457? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 457. Representative Lynn, you're going to be next. Finally. So. I'm going to open the hearing. We'll be stopping at noon. We'll be carrying over to next week. I apologize for that. We'll went long today, longer than for that. So we'll get started with Representative Lynn. Good morning, sir.
Well, maybe not the whole time, but for a while. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee for not recessing after the last one, at least letting the hearing on this begin. I appreciate that very much. My name is Bob Lynn. I'm a state representative from Rockingham, District 17. I represent the town of Wyndham. And I'm here in support of House Bill 60. Which I think might sort of colloquially be known as a contract means what it says act. Basically, the purpose of this bill is to overrule a really most unfortunate decision of the New Hampshire Supreme Court from 2005, which said, I have to say, in my own defense, that it was long before I ever got to the court. That decision said that in the case of restricted property, and I should note here that Restricted property doesn't mean that you are somebody that owns a lot of property. Restricted property can mean that you, as a landlord, own as little as a two-family property as long as you don't live in one of the two units. So it can apply to very small landlords. And what that decision said was that the end of a lease, the end of the term of a lease, does not constitute good cause for evicting someone who doesn't want to leave. And so the result of that decision is that you have a contract. For example, let's suppose that I'm a landlord, and I should say, by the way, that I am not a landlord. I do not own any rental property. But say that I'm a landlord and I enter into a lease with a tenant for a year. Under that decision, what the law means is that the contract is for a year for the tenant. At the end of the year, if the tenant wants to leave, the tenant can leave. But I, as the landlord, if the tenant does not want to leave, and assuming I have to, I want to be completely candid, assuming that the tenant obviously has to pay the rent, can't destroy the property, can't disrupt other tenants. But if the tenant does none of those things, and the tenant just decides, I don't want to leave at the end of the year, the tenant doesn't have to leave. And the rationale of the courts, of the majority of the court, was that, well, for these kinds, for landlords, the issue shouldn't be, the issue should only be, is the tenant paying the rent? Is the tenant, doing what they're supposed to do in the property? And that should be the end of it. And nothing beyond that. There was a concurring decision in that case by Justice Joseph Netto. The reason it wasn't a dissenting opinion is that it was some procedural issue, and frankly, I don't remember what it was. But so it was a concurring decision. But let me read to you, and I should say, Justice Netto, a very well-respected and lifelong Democrat appointed to the Supreme Court by Governor Shaheen. Here's what he had to say about the majority's decision. Under the majority's interpretation, lease provisions purporting to limit the lease to a specified duration have no meaning. The effect of the majority's interpretation is to create a perpetual tenancy, virtually a life interest in favor of a tenant of restricted property covered by the statute. I do not believe that that was the intent of the landlord-tenant statutes. That was, and I submit that his reasoning was right on the money. I think the important thing, you may sort of be asking yourself, what are the practical consequences of this? And I think the practical consequences are very significant, because one of the things that the court's majority said was, well, look, if you're going to rent to somebody, make your decision up front about whether or not you want those people to be there for the long term, potentially, I suppose, as Justice Netto said, for life. So stop and think about that. And particularly in this housing environment. Suppose you're a landlord and you're considering renting to somebody, and maybe that person isn't, is not going to make, the cover of Home Beautiful magazine for the, for the perfect tenant. Mm-hmm. Maybe that tenant has a spotty credit record. Or maybe you talk to that tenant and it seems like the tenant is pretty boisterous and you're sort of thinking to yourself, how is this guy going to get along with other people in the building? Well, if under the law as it exists now, if you know that once you let that guy in, you can't get him out if he doesn't want to go, as long as he pays the rent and does the other thing. You may very well say to yourself, wait a minute, if I'm entering into this 1-year lease, if the lease is really only for a year, and at the end of the year, I can say I'm not renewing if I want to, then maybe I'll take a chance on this person because it's only a year's exposure. But under the current law, that's not the case. Once you let the person in, they're there. And so it seems to me that obviously has a discouraging effect on a landlord. It says, it encourages landlords to only rent to the person who comes closest to being the ideal tenant. And I submit that under this housing market particularly, that's not what you want. The last thing I would say is, or the last 2 points I would like to make, and I'll try to be brief, is this. Apparently, there has been some testimony, maybe it was in the House hearing or somewhere, suggesting that somehow adopting this bill would allow, would repeal in some way or undermine the ability of, under current law, for a tenant to file, to resist being evicted on the grounds of retaliation, or perhaps even on some other grounds of discrimination on the basis of race, creed, color, whatever. It absolutely does not do that. There's nothing in this bill that says that if this bill is passed, it's okay for a landlord to retaliate against a tenant or to discriminate against a tenant. So that, for example, if the evidence was that at the end of a 1-year lease, the landlord told the tenant to leave, and it wasn't because the lease was over, but it was because, for example, the tenant was African American, or the tenant was Jewish, or the tenant was gay, that would be illegal on whether this bill passes or not. It has nothing to do with any kind of allowing discrimination. And the last thing I would say is that there's been this argument that somehow this bill will increase homelessness. And I hope that you will think carefully about about that. It's a great talking point for those people who don't support this bill. But if you actually think about it, I submit to you, it doesn't hold any water. Because think about it. We have a very, very low vacancy rate, which means that if somebody is evicted from their property, it's very likely that the landlord is going to be able to re-rent the property. There is simply no evidence to suggest that a person who would be evicted, if this, who might be evicted if this became law, is any more likely to become homeless than someone who would take over that rental wouldn't come from the homeless. It's one in, one out, and there's no reason to expect that one is more likely to become homeless than relieving one person from being homeless. So for all those reasons, I ask you to restore the law to what it should be, that property rights are important, that contracts mean what they say, and so that landlords are not discouraged from renting to people who don't fit the ideal model of a tenant. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Do we have questions? All right, seeing none. I'll go. Senator Ricciardi.
Nice to see you. Thank you for taking my question. Can you tell me, can landlords currently evict people for not paying rent, for destroying the premises? Can they evict people because they want to move family members in? Can they evict people because they simply want to renovate? Do landlords have that ability at this time?
They do. They do have that ability.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can I just make one other point? And I think particularly this will be of interest to you, Senator. Yeah. You may recall that I believe last year when this bill was here, you suggested, would it make sense to increase the notice period for this to 60 days? And I think I said at the time that I agreed with that, and that this bill, as it came out of the House, does increase the notice period to 60 days. So I just thought I'd make mention of that.
Senator Reardon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Lynn, for taking my question. The examples you provided about why you might not want to keep a tenant after the expiration of the lease were they're not going to make the cover of Home Beautiful. They may have a spotty credit record. They may be boisterous. Aren't those all reasons that are already in the law that you could evict a tenant for?
And I think you might be misunderstanding what my point was. My point was, at the beginning, before you make the decision on whether you want somebody to become your tenant, one of the things you're going to consider is how much risk am I taking? And my point was that if you know that if you make the decision to allow this person to become a tenant, then the person is there for the long haul. You may say to yourself, well, you know, I don't think I want to take the risk on this particular person because he's not the ideal tenant. Whereas if you knew that your risk was only limited to 30 to 1 year, for example, and that at the end of the year, you don't have to have a reason. You can simply say the lease is over and I choose not to extend the lease. And so in that circumstance, I think you might, you know, you might very well say, okay, I can take that risk.
Follow up?
Follow
Please.
up.
So if at the end of the year, the person, it may not be home beautiful, the spotty credit record, you have a reason if in fact they haven't paid their rent to evict them, or if they're boisterous and they're affecting the quiet enjoyment of the property, those are all reasons where you could separate that tenant.
Sure, if you can prove that, and I think that's part of the problem, is that there may be. I mean, I think we heard testimony, I believe, in the House of, you know, if somebody, just to take the example, if somebody's a drug dealer or using drugs in the apartment, and sort of, you know, it's everybody kind of in the other tenants kind of know that. That's one thing, getting them to come in and actually go to court and say that. And that's just one example, but there could be many, many examples of knowing that something is happening, but not being able to prove it because of various reasons, people not wanting to cooperate, et cetera.
One more follow-up.
One more follow-up.
Thank you. I want to just go back to your scenario that this is a really tight housing market.
Right.
And when you separate one tenant, you're going to have a tenant ready and available, the one in, one out kind of theory. If you took a chance on a tenant that might have been boisterous, maybe didn't keep the apartment as nice as possible, does that tenant easily go find another apartment?
Does that if you took the chance on the tenant and then you got rid of them? Yeah, it may very well be that they don't. But I guess the point I was making before was, so let's assume that person can't find a house, can't find another unit. Is there any reason really to believe? Okay, so now we have that you say, okay, that's another +1 for somebody who becomes homeless. Why is there any reason to believe that the person who ends up renting the apartment wouldn't come from the homeless? It's complete, you know, it's complete speculation that that's true. That's my point.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mr. Andrew Harmon, please.
Is this one?
It is. All right. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Testing? Okay. My name is Sorry. My name is Andrew Harmon. I'm currently a resident of New Hampton, New Hampshire. For 8.5 years, I lived in Keene, New Hampshire, through the Keene Housing Authority's colloquially referred to as Section 8 program, the Housing Urban Development Subsidized Housing. And I wanted to address some points. Number one, if you can find a place that is open, and if you manage to qualify, there's still a very lengthy wait time to be able to get in, even if it doesn't completely fall under subsidized living. Having a lease that goes for a year, I have to renew it, I have to go through the process for it every year because that's the way they structured it. But if they can just say that the end of the year is up and that's enough to kick someone out, that's not enough. Even 60 days may not be enough time to find another place to live. And that's assuming that you don't have needs for something like a direct support staff person who helps you with your independent living needs in the place. A lot of times those support staff are very hard to find and may only be in a certain area. If there is nothing else the same cost as the place because of inflation or other issues, this could cause any number of cascading issues. So I would deeply urge you to vote against this, especially as was mentioned earlier, there's already still in place the rules that if you don't pay your rent, if you damage the place, and you at least are given a chance to cure any of those problems through notice from the place. So thank you. I'm willing to take questions.
Okay. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Appreciate it. Representative Kathy Staub. She's still with us? Okay, if you're sure on that. All right, let me see then. Judith Jones from New Futures.
Good
Morning.
afternoon. I'm so pleased to be here before this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And New Futures is a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that works to solve New Hampshire's problems through policy change. We also lead the advocacy for the New Hampshire Alliance for Healthy Aging, which is a coalition of individuals and organizational stakeholders committed to the well-being of older Granite Staters. What I'd love to point out for the committee today is the impact of this bill across the generations. And I think that the impact of the bill, you'll hear other people with life testimony, that homelessness is not a talking point. It's not just a mere talking point, but a reality that impacts people deeply. So if we look at children, housing instability is considered an adverse childhood event, toxic stress that can impact the brain and cause negative health impacts. Individuals who are struggling with substance use disorder and really trying to make their life changes positive, data shows that eviction can cause to relapse. What I'd like to focus on a little bit are a population that you may not know the most recent figures, and that is older adults in New Hampshire. So we're looking at national trends, and national trends show that the fastest growing group of homeless is older adults. And unfortunately, that national trend, we always hope it doesn't come to New Hampshire. But what we find through the 2024 report on homelessness from the Coalition on Homelessness is that in New Hampshire, in fact, older adults has increased from 2019 to 2023 by 23%. So what we're seeing in New Hampshire is older adults impacted. 20% are renters, and unfortunately, most older adults are on fixed incomes. When we look at the discussion around homelessness and moving, it is a little bit mechanistic to think, well, one in, one out. We just want to raise the other costs of moving. And picture you're an older adult on a fixed income. We've had listening sessions, individuals who want to work. Their body won't let them. So now I've got to be anxious about my housing. What about the cost of moving? What about the cost of first month rent, last month rent, security deposit? So these are all things that really are real life impacts to older adults. Just want the committee to consider, given the other testimony you'll hear, is whether this is the correct time for this kind of bill where we're facing housing instability, housing crisis, and a negative impact across generations in New Hampshire. I thank you for hearing from all members across the spectrum, and happy to take any questions.
All right, Senator Ricciardi.
Thank you for being here and for taking my question. Do you think that House Bill 60 creates a new basis for eviction, or just a process to exit a tenant at the expiration of the lease without utilizing the eviction process?
I think what I would refer, I have some legal scholars sitting behind me who practice landlord-tenant law on a daily basis, and we're going to defer that question to them versus my humble opinion. I haven't practiced landlord-tenant law in 12 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Unfortunately, I'm going to close temporarily the hearing on House Bill 60 and carry it to next week. For those of you who signed up today that we couldn't get to, I apologize. Next week, we'll start at 9:30. We will open with this bill. If we have the same number signed up, I'll limit testimony to 3 minutes. So if you intend to come back next week, rehearse it. And we'll keep you at 3 minutes. Again, I'm sorry about that. It's just the way it goes. We will then do executive session following the hearing on House Bill 60 next week and wrap up the business of the Commerce Committee for the year. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned. Aaron, I'll take these up with me. You want them? Yeah.